Hello everyone, and welcome back to Monsters of the Mind. As always, I'm your host, Mr.G. So, there are a lot of B-movies out there. Basically, they're considered horror movies that didn't really have the most amount of money put into them. Now, horror movies are already pretty famous for the fact that they're pretty low budget, but B-movies are on an even cheaper level. Why am I talking about this? Well, it's because today we're talking about arguably the most famous B-movie star of them all. The Blob. The Blob is a giant amoeba from outer space. It has a ferocious appetite, and as you can imagine from the fact that it has no solid mass, it is very hard to kill. It starts out gray, but as it eats things, the blood of what it eats dyes it bright red. The Blob debuted in the 1958 B-movie of the same name. In this film, it comes to Earth on an asteroid and eats anything that touches it. The more that it eats, the larger it gets. The monster wreaks havoc, being basically unstoppable for reasons I explained earlier. I mean, have you ever tried killing a ball of jello? Exactly. Getting larger and larger as it eats more and more. But people later realize that the Blob immediately retreats from cold things, which gives them an idea of how to beat the slime monster. They gather up the survivors and everyone shoots cold things at the Blob, freezing it in a block of ice. And they eventually airlift it to the Arctic so it'll never thaw as long as the Arctic stays cold. Oof. The Blob was one of those critics hate it, but audiences loved movies. But regardless of middling critical reviews, it made bank. It had a budget of only $100,000 and made $4 million. So, filmmakers ate good that night. 14 years later, they made a sequel, Beware the Blob. In this film, a piece of the frozen Blob is accidentally brought to Los Angeles, where it thaws out and goes on another rampage. Eventually, it ends up at a skating rink, where it freezes again. But since we're now in the age of "Is the monster really dead?" movies, a newscaster accidentally thaws a piece of it out with their bright studio light and a section of it becomes animate again. I can't actually find how this film was received or even how much money it made, so I guess nobody cared enough to keep track of that stuff, so let's move on. 16 years later, we got a remake. Not much to say, it's basically a retelling of the first film, but since we're still in the age of the monster isn't really dead, after the Blob gets frozen, it's revealed that a priest has secretly kept a piece of it since he believes that the Blob is a sign of biblical end times. So yeah, it's basically the original film, but with weird religious commentary. Okay. This film was not a success. It had a massive budget increase of $10 million, but it only made $8 million, so ouch. Plus, people said the film just lacked the charm of the original, so disappointing box office combined with bad reviews equals dead franchise. Now, the Blob, being from a B-movie, is nowhere near as respected as other monsters from movies that are considered true films like Dracula or King Kong, but the films are classic among people who enjoy those kinds of movies and with horror fans in general, really. And the Blob is one of the most iconic monsters to originate in film. He popularized the idea of sentient blob monster, since if you think about it, an indestructible creature that has an uncontrollable appetite is a pretty scary idea. So, as such, a lot of media has aliens that are blob monsters, or you'll see sentient blobs in a lot of horror tributes. Things like that. Thanks for watching, and remember, never touch ooze from space. Not because it could be the Blob, but because you don't know where it's been. Could be alien crap. What's wrong with you? Why are you just touching random blobs from space? Jeez.